Hey everybody, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz, in which I conduct in-depth and revealing interviews of icons of the weddings and event industry. This is all to provide you with education and inspiration. And I am so excited because tomorrow I am going to be going to Orlando for Podcast Movement, which is a very big podcast conference. And while I'm there, I'm going to be interviewing Rebecca Grenels and Catherine Arce of Engage Luxury Wedding Summits. This will be a part 2. I recorded them, right at the beginning of when I launched the show about 2 years ago. And so I'm just super excited to sit down with Rebecca and Catherine again. If you missed last week's episode, it was with Sean DeFreitas, a wonderful, wonderful designer out of the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area who works all over the world. Very special interview with Sean. And I'm ready to announce this week's guest, and that is David Adler, CEO and founder of BizBash, a resource marketplace for event organizers of all types, from corporate and association planners to those who plan high-end personal and social events. BizBash is the leading trade media for the event and meeting industry, and David's site has become the largest media property in the B2B event industry with nearly 2 million annual user sessions. Also, he's got a podcast called Gather Geeks Podcast, and he and a co-host talk about the latest news and trends affecting event marketeers and meeting strategists, nonprofit organizers, and more. So enjoy my conversation with David Adler. David, it has probably been about, you don't know me necessarily from this time ago, but like 15 years ago plus, I would see you, because of my music company, I would see you at various conferences just all over the place, seeing you speak, seeing you roam the halls. And so it's fun to be able to have you behind the mic and for us to finally talk like this on the show. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah.
Well, it's a whole different world. 15 years ago was this last century, literally, even though it wasn't.
Right. No, it is. I mean, are you familiar with the, what is it called? The singular theory of singularity that Ray Kurzweil talks about? It's the rate of change, how it's getting faster and faster and faster. What happened in 100 years took 50, and then what took 50 now takes 4. Yeah. So it's the idea that eventually it's vertical. Yeah. Vertical goes, and that's when
I don't know if you feel that, but I feel that.
I'm feeling tired from all of this. Very tired. But how, I would love to know, for someone who doesn't really know the event vocabulary, even though this is for event professionals, how would you describe what you do?
We allow event organizers to peek over the fence to see what other people are doing so that they can get ideas for their own events. Event organizers have to eat, sleep, and drink inspiration every single day because it is the fuel that gives them ideas and creativity to create better events.
Yeah, it's an art.
It's an art.
To me, it's like any other artist.
I believe that, and my guys are so bored with me saying it, but I believe event organizers of any types are really collaboration artists. They're not event organizers. They're not event planners. They're not party planners for sure. They're collaboration artists because at the end of the day, yes, the logistics have to be perfect, but people have to make sure that their time is well spent and that they're getting something from whatever relationship that's being created.
Yeah, I love how you're framing that. I'm curious where all this came from for you. I mean, I know that at 21, just after graduating from American University, right? You're from the DC area, that you founded and was CEO of Washington Dosier, a magazine that covered power, society, politics, entertaining DC. I want to come back to that, but did you have any of this going on like in junior high, high school?
I was involved in my high school newspaper. I was involved in political campaigns all over the place. Yeah. I grew up wanting to be in politics. I wanted to be a senator. I handed out flyers for Kennedy when the voting day in 1963.
Yeah.
So I was totally into the idea. And I found that being in the media made you feel it was even more important and more of a feeling of helping other people than being in politics. Because I view myself as the mayor of my niche. And that what I do is I help the industry grow. Mm-hmm. I help take out the trash when there's a problem. And I help, the constituents do what they do best and try to raise the level of the industry. So it's all the great packages of why to be in business together. I mean, I love media.
Did your parents, were they involved in any way?
Yes.
In any of this?
My father had an ad agency in Washington, D.C. called Warren Adler Limited. And I started working for him when I was 16 or 17. And he was like the real estate king. He named Watergate. He named all of these real estate projects in Virginia. And he went on to become a novelist, and he ended up writing 50 novels, and is well known for his most famous one was something called The War of the Roses, which was a movie with Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
And the good news is that he just passed away about 4 months ago, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And but he did this really interesting thing. He left my brothers and I part of his inheritance, or part of our inheritance, so that we get the profits from promoting his books.
Oh, wow.
So we are going to actually next year, there's going to be the Broadway play of War of the Roses.
Oh,
and
come
we have,
on.
It's going to be really interesting. And we also have many movies that are about to pop. And my brother Jonathan has done a tremendous job in raising money and become a total movie mogul. And he is single-handedly creating a whole empire for us on the movie business and the book business and the entertainment business. So I'm very proud of him for taking a big role. And my brother's also an actor, so he's become the creative director. So I'm kind of the silent partner in the deal.
It's interesting, though, isn't it, how so many people I've interviewed, and maybe you too, had the passion for what they do when they were very young.
It's interesting that you say that, because everyone that I've talked to said that they got the bug in high school or even before that.
Yeah.
And so everyone has a high school story about event organizing in some way.
Or even younger. I mean, I've interviewed, there's people, I'm trying to think who it was. I think it was Robert Fountain, but there's a lot of stories where at the age of 5 or 6, his father would come home at night, or his parents would be out. They'd come back, had a babysitter, or whatever, but he would have rearranged furniture. Yeah. You know, that kind of thing. Like, it's 6 years old, and it's not uncommon. Yeah. Yep. You know, saying flower, all of that. So what happened? Did you majored in journalism? Is that
I was a communication major, but I grew up in the era of Nixon's resignation.
Wow!
And
so you all were probably plastered to the TV.
And I led the demonstrations on my university, and I was a part of student government, and I was the editor of the yearbook, and I was very active. I never went to class. I actually went to it was part of like the American University school where you had to learn about the world. I went to high school at BCC here in Maryland. And like the biggest classes I remember were raising money for Biafra during the early days. So you kind of grew up here. You feel like you want to be an activist, and that's why I wanted to actually be involved in politics. Yeah,
well, I could see threads, which we're going to get to in a moment, you know, in terms of what you're doing now that still obviously relates to that. So right after college, when you started the Dossier, was that when you were vice president of corporate communications for Prime Media?
No. Well, I was 21, so I wouldn't have been that job yet.
Yeah, that's right, vice president.
I had started working for my father's ad agency, and we had several clients. One was the Foxhall condominiums, and the other was a bank called Century Bank, actually. And it was 1975, and I view that as the tail end of the 60s. And
listen, I remember 75. Okay, I'm old enough to remember.
I remember it very well, actually. And I had this idea, because I always had a million ideas, that we should create a magazine for just the high-end people that would buy condominiums at Foxhall. That turned into the beginning of Washington Dosier magazine, which was a society magazine for Washington.
At 21,
At 21, I hired my mother to be the editor.
Yeah.
And my father had this ad agency, so I was able to have the infrastructure. So my father lent us $6,000, and we built a magazine that turned out to be at the end of like 15 years, like 300 pages, and we created the list of the 500 most important people in Washington, and we covered events. So I was always on the other side of events.
Interesting, yeah.
And people thought I was a maitre d' for many years because I was in black tie all the time, and you can tell the actual caterer by the hors d'oeuvre that that got scary when you knew you walked into a party and you saw the tomato and chicken salad and you knew it was Ridgewell's. And you get to know a lot of the political guys, and the political people were so interested in the accoutrements of events, because the main skill of a politician is doing events. Politician, raising money and having receptions and things like that.
That's right. Yeah.
So we ended up selling Dossier in 1999
and you're saying 15 years you had it.
I had it from 75 to 90.
Incredible.
And it was we went through the period of I went through Ford, Carter, Reagan, and Bush 1.
Wow.
Before we actually sold it. And
dynamic period.
And it was really interesting, because these people, I went to dinner parties at 21 it was like incredible to watch Washington then, because Washington was when there was money at the diplomatic level, the embassies. So we had the era of this guy Atashir Zahidi, who was the Iranian ambassador, who would be lavishly entertaining at his embassy and sending everybody beluga caviar and Dom Perignon, and it was a crazy time. With Liz Taylor walking around town, it was a glamour piece.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when Reagan came in, it even flipped even more.
Yeah, well,
we went through a period of
right.
it was pretty incredible, and you get to know the people in power. It was really interesting.
What do you think that you learned from that that still carries through?
That
to
people
a
are
great
human,
degree? Yeah,
and that no matter how much power and the accoutrements of power, people are people.
Yeah,
and they want to talk to each other, and they want to feel connected, and that a good event is something where we're very social animals. And also, the greatest thing, I'm reading a book, I've been talking about this book called Social Physics, How Ideas Flow. And what I learned recently is that the best events are these 6 to 8 cocktail parties in Washington, D.C., where powerful people can get together, have conversations, and actually change the world because they are intersecting with all these other ideas. And they go back to their office and say, oh, we got to do that. Because the most powerful word in the English language is the word let's. So whenever people get together, it's let's get a lunch, let's get a dinner, let's hook up, let's start a revolution, let's create a new bill. And if you have real power, you can actually do stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. So that's what's been my driving force for BizBash, is the idea that we're all collaboration artists.
Well, and I absolutely want to come back to BizBash. Still, just to get your trajectory, what did you do after you sold Dosier?
So I ended up being working for a guy named Robert Maxwell, who was a British media lord who owned Macmillan, and I ended up being the head of corporate communications for a company called Macmillan, which is the textbook company and a lot of other media publishing outlets.
Yeah.
And that was really, really incredible because as head of corporate communications, I would do all the entertaining on the yacht, and I would do all the traveling around the world with the chairman, and it was really pretty incredible. And he was a real mercurial character. He was a lord. He was a media lord from England. He owned the Mirror newspapers. He was a bigger than life type of guy. And he would say things like, oh, I need to stop in on the president. Can you arrange that? And I have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Or I'm doing a party in 12 minutes on my yacht for Rupert Murdoch and Donald Trump and all these. So I introduced Donald Trump to David Pecker on one of Maxwell's yachts during the 90s during the early 89, 90, when Maxwell and Trump had the same size yachts.
The same size yachts.
It was pretty funny.
I was about to go somewhere, but I'm not going to go there.
It's pretty much the same deal.
There.
No, I know where you're going. I learned a lot about events from that because I learned that when I would do an event with Maxwell, who was a brilliant guy at organizing how people should sit on a dais, we would spend hours social engineering an event.
I get it.
And so the CEOs that really understood how to do social engineering and use social events as a way to get what they wanted and to sell products and to raise the value of their stock or to raise money, it was the secret weapon.
Interesting.
Totally the secret weapon.
Yeah. So much thought behind it. No one would think about.
And it was a day when you just asked your friends. I would hire this guy named Robert Isabel. And
Robert. He started the event industry, basically.
I would do events with him, and I would basically have to say, okay, I only have $1 million, and he would think I was a pauper because the event.
And in those days, that was even more than
that was even a lot because you negotiated one tree was $100,000, but people wanted to go to the greatest events, and it was a little bit before all the recessions and things like that happened. So it was kind of interesting.
Well, let's move forward to BizBash because there's so much I want to get into before you leave town here today. What was the idea that sparked you actually? Because that's a real talk about, entrepreneurial idea to start something of this that has turned into something of this magnitude. Yeah.
Well, the original idea, I was at Prime Media as head of corporate communications. We own 300 magazines. We own New York Magazine, 17, Soap Opera Digest.
Special Event too, right?
We bought Special Event. Yeah. It was one of the biggest roll-up media companies. And it was amazing. And so I had to have in my office, I had to have like a magazine rack with like 300 magazines just to know what we were publishing. And so we had like the 25th anniversary of New York Magazine and the 50th anniversary of 17 and Soap Opera Digest parties where I had to bring in the drag queens from New York because I couldn't find them in LA. And so it was really, really interesting. And I forgot the question.
Well, it was in terms of the idea that sparked something like
So I saw the power of these events. And there was nothing around. There was no vehicle to try to figure. You call your friends and you'd ask, who does this stuff? Mm-hmm. So the vendors, the event organizers had all the things in their Rolodex. And so then this thing came around called the internet. And my family had started something called apartment guides. You know, that these books that were in the drugstore.
Oh, sure. Right. I remember.
And it was selling real estate by the month in a sense. So I said, wouldn't it be fun to create a company that sells real estate by the hour? And the hour meant venues, because the first thing an event person has to do is get a venue. So I used the apartment guide model that my father created to create sort of a vehicle to allow people to choose venues. And because of the internet, it was easier to create a directory. Then I discovered that we could go into an event and we can say who did what at every event. And we created a directory. And we disintermediated the event planner so that they weren't selling their Rolodex, they were selling their brains. And so we ended up publishing this directory that had, here's a great party at the Rockefeller Center, and this is the guy that did the flowers, and this is the guy that did the entertainment, and everybody wanted to get the vendor that did that party that they read about.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of sparked it. We started in New York City. And we ended up expanding it to Los Angeles, to Chicago, to Miami, we did Las Vegas and Toronto and Washington. And we focus on the big markets right now.
Incredible. You know, there's a quote related to everything we're talking about so far that you had said, I'd like to dig in more connected to this with BizBash. You said, somewhere in an interview or maybe your website, we've seen a revolution and evolution in the event world. And with the introduction of the iPhone 11 years ago, everyone became a content curator. Because of that capability, events are no longer just for the people in the room, but for all the amplification power of the people in the room. And the result is that around 25% of the marketing budgets now have an event component, and there is more strategic use of events to market everything from products to presidential candidates.
Right. Because what's happening is that if you think about using that political model I talked about, and the event is the beginning of like a campaign, everything is surrounded around that. And the budgets get bigger because you're not dealing with 200 people in the room. You're dealing with 200 people in the room plus every one of their influencers that they're on their lists. So the reach is so much bigger. So all of a sudden the marketers had discovered it. And so they're willing to create moments now that amplify. And then with Instagram, the social moments became visual, and that even extended it even more. So so you talk to 200 people in the room, and you're really talking to thousands.
That's right.
And so that's kind of why we're sort of like why events are at the top. Now, the other piece of why events are at the top is somebody discovered, hey, when you actually look at someone face to face, you're going to have a better relationship. And a better relationship means a longer term piece of business from them because you get trust, and trust happens face to face even more than it does digitally. So the idea, it all works in harmony, and we're all kind of about surround sound now. So you want to hear it, you want to touch it, you want to see it, you want to feel it. It's all
experiential, yeah.
It's all experiential. And the thing about experiential, that an experience, if it's the same experience, is not an experiential event. So you have to keep upping your game all the time. And so BizBash allows you to peek over the fence to see what other people are doing. Because the competition is now fierce for even a more engaging experience.
It is. And the market seems so saturated in every respect.
But it's becoming it's a better tool for everybody.
Yeah.
It's with media kind of going out the window, that there's no water cooler to gather around anymore.
Hey, so people the rise of podcasts, by the way.
That's true. Yeah. But
and we're going to talk about yours too before we go.
The event is the new town square. And the town square where you actually have people gathering. And so town squares are becoming platforms, and people are gathering more and more. So you're not creating one event anymore for the most part. You're creating a platform of events around an event, or a strategic program around an event.
What about the integration of technology? I know that that's really close to your heart. And with with what's going on in the world today, the rate of change and all of that, and technology's driving so much. Before we hit the record button, you were showing me, some stuff about your presentations. Can you tell me about that, about the integration of technology?
Well, not my philosophy, but the philosophy of technology is it's making what was complex trivial. That's the whole purpose of it. Registration is about making it simpler and making it so it's invisible. Can you imagine the greatest technology in the world was when someone developed the microphone so people can hear?
We forget that. Yeah.
I mean, so every little advance, there's a lot of new shiny objects out there.
Yes.
But ultimately, it's about how to make something simpler and trivial.
Can you give me an example of something that does that right now that you particularly enjoy?
Yes. Chatbots.
Chatbots
are becoming the big thing, so that you're not learning anything new. You're going to your regular text. We've learned how to text, and chatbots are becoming smarter and smarter. It's the beginning of AI and events.
For those who may not know what a chatbot is,
basically is like we did at our trade show yesterday in Washington, and we have a chatbot that talks to you. Her name is Betty, and if you want to go to an event and you need to know where the exits are, you need to know when the next session is, you need to know who's there, you just text in a number, and it out comes all the information about the actual event.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go to an event app.
Yes.
So you're just basically using something that's simpler.
I have not yet experienced that myself.
Oh, it's going to be everywhere. Now, chatbot, I think you're going to see chatbots and event apps sort of evolving into kind of the same thing at some point, I think. But the smarter guys, there's one company called Scientia that does a great job of it. And it really becomes smarter and smarter and smarter at each event. Even at a wedding, you're going to see chatbots.
How so at a wedding?
Well, because basically everybody has the same issues. You want something smart to tell you, when the next event is, and it'll text you. It'll forward things. Hey, come on over to the engagement thing, or we're going to do the ribbon, the throwing of the whatever.
That's right.
Of the bouquet, and it communicates using your smartphone in something that you don't have to learn anything new.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't want to do.
Well, that's the thing. There are still people that are, hesitant with technology learning to, because there's so much coming out that we got to keep up with.
We're going back a little bit in time to we had a thing yesterday saying that we're moving so fast that we're going back to more nostalgia and things that you trust.
Yeah.
And so
we feel more connected that
things
way.
like simpler phones that don't have as many features.
I've heard about this. Yeah.
It's a big trend that's blossoming. And the idea that, in fact, even we have these Jeffersonian style dinners before every trade show or every event for the speakers. And we discovered in LA last week that even things like Comic-Con are getting simpler. Everything is getting simpler. There's a little bit of a pushback, overload, and it's ebbing and flowing.
Yeah.
But that's why, when we talk about technology, if it's too complex, people just decide they don't want to go near it after a while.
Well, how do you feel, talk about complex, how do you feel about augmented reality and how that's going to affect the event industry? How it already is, but where it's coming.
My magazine is now augmented reality. So you can then read a printed magazine page and hold your smartphone over it or your glasses of some sort, and it'll make it look like your computer screen, which is just the beginning of the future. We're like in the big brick phone stage of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I believe I'm focusing now on spatial computing.
Yes.
Where the room is the screen, and they're going to be programming the room. Magic Leap is this big company that's raised billions of dollars. And when you think about it, it's not necessarily augmented reality or virtual reality or mixed reality. It's shared reality. So that you can be speaking in front of a room and there's a 3D object that you're sharing with everyone else while you're presenting.
Incredible.
You're walking inside of a heart if you're teaching medicine.
Yeah.
Or there's a play that's happening on your desk in front of you. So that's happening. That is all happening now. We're definitely it's going to be the future of decor. It's going to be the future of smart chairs. It's happening everywhere. It's really interesting, and it's going to be exciting as hell to watch.
This makes me want to ask this too, because somewhere I read that you said, I also foresee something called practicing radical humanization, which will be a reaction to the scary side of artificial intelligence and machine learning. It will be a race to show that despite data, a company still has a heart and puts people first.
Right. Tom Peters, the big business consultant, says that if he could do anything today, he would buy up every URL that says radical humanism or human stuff. And his big consulting thing is take your employees to lunch and hear what they have to say. And so I believe in the event industry, it's all about radical humanism, because you're going to see conferences where they're going to spend more time on one-on-one conversations with people, more time on not sticking to the script, more time on breaking the fourth wall, being really human.
Yeah.
I was at a conference a few months last year where they decided, okay, it's hot out, let's just move everything to the pool. So it would drive a traditional event or meeting organizer crazy.
Yeah, right.
But that's the way people live.
Yeah.
So the whole idea is to there's going to be more unconferences. There's going to be more spontaneous conferences. There's going to be more things that are real. And there's going to be more things when I talk about radical humanism or just humanism in general. Why not hold your conference in Napa Valley after the fire because it's going to help them? Why not go to New York and do your event there because we just had the 9/11 problem? So there's a lot of things that are going to have people will add different elements to the way they think about practical things. And you're going to see more and more of that in site inspections and things like that. We're already seeing that.
Yeah. And how has the immediacy of today's digital world and ability to instantly share content, how is that affecting your business? Or is it not really?
Well, it is, but I think that people are, I think there's a reaction to it. There's a slowing down period where people want to turn off their phones.
Yeah.
Things like that. But there's also this thing, I am on the board of this thing called NVentU, which is it's a nonprofit here in Washington that takes inner city kids, underprivileged kids, and teaches them about the event industry. So I went to, and we basically expose them to this world so that it's not, we talk about in nonprofits, it's not a pathway to prison, it's a pathway to careers. And once they see this industry, they love it. And they say, oh my God, there's so much stuff going on in here. So it's really good. But I'd had this conversation with these 3 women that are 16, and they were telling me about, have you heard of code switching? And yeah, I kind of heard of code switching in that, kids talk to their parents one way and their teachers one way and their friends another way. But at an event, there's a different type of code switching. There's the code switching that's happened in text underneath the table that says that guy's really hot or that person's fat or, really sort of snarky things. And then you have at the table, there's this human thing where people are dressed up and they're nice to each other. And then they have their social media brand where they have their fake self.
Right.
So you have all 3 levels. So technology is impacting the way we behave at events, the way people perceive at events, and the way we really are. So it's kind of an interesting blinding glimpse of the obvious when you think about it. Because how many times have you gone to a conference and you're talking to your colleague at another seat and they say, this guy sucks, and you're watching the speaker.
Exactly.
But so these are going on at all different levels. So the technology is helping in different ways as well. It's interesting to watch. And it's time to sort of sit back and somewhat be a little observant, even if it's a wedding, seeing the behavior at the wedding, things like that.
But how do you keep up with all of this?
You have to be curious all the time, and you have to talk to 27-year-olds.
I was going to say, right.
You cannot, my generation is so far behind that we don't have to be, though.
We're so resistant.
Well, you have to lean into the millennials and the next generation, because if you don't, I don't think people would recognize business today. My colleagues, most of the people.
Right.
Marketing is moving so fast.
Yeah, they went to sleep and woke up 20 years later.
It's crazy. So you have to stay in touch if you want to be active in commerce or if you want to be active in life.
I was going to ask you, and this makes me think too, because I also think it's a little bit of a different direction about, you've seen it all now. I
don't think I've seen it all.
Well, with BizBash, 19 years and count, right? And even beyond that. In terms of event pros, having longevity in such a dynamically changing industry and what we're talking about, having to keep up and all of that, I imagine that's one of the keys to keeping this longevity is being able to embrace it.
Well, how do you stay young? Be curious.
Yeah.
Be curious, read a lot of stuff, observe the world, go to things. I think that the idea of constantly, we had someone yesterday saying that the most incredible people are the ones that are consuming more information than they're actually producing. So for every event that you do, you have to study about 1,000 of them to get to do the one that you do. Or no, we're in the podcast. We're like podcast geeks now.
Yeah.
So I've listened to 1,000 podcasts.
Yeah, I'm listening daily.
And so I'm going to become an expert at what I do. And podcasting and talking to people is one part of it, but learning the craft of it is another part.
That's right.
And so people get better and better at the craft. And the good news about the event industry, it's getting more codified. So the craft is becoming more scientific and smarter.
With all that you see too, what about still messaging our brand effectively is a critical, especially in today's age and with social media and all of that. It seems harder to differentiate ourselves at the same time. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think everybody is followers. They're all followers. Everybody's following. You have to have your brand this way, and you have to talk about, I'm in the experience business. And it's all kind of BS. That you got to create something that nobody else is doing, as opposed to just listening to everyone else, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I like going on the other direction and combining things that are not normally combined, and just try stuff and don't be afraid.
And you're talking to, about innovation.
Yeah.
And it seems to me, both of us on our shows, and before we go, I want to talk about your podcast, Gather Geeks. A lot of the big hitters out there, why are they like that? They're innovators. They don't innovate once. They don't innovate twice. It's a lifestyle.
And you're going to fail half the time.
Well, I just interviewed, it was really interesting. Tim Chi, right?
Yeah.
CEO, founder, or CEO of the Not
Tim.
Worldwide.
I love Tim.
Yeah. What a great guy. But he was talking about how I asked him about something related to this. He said, he started laughing. He said, I have failed so many times. You got to really try, go, fail, win, all of that too.
Everybody does.
Yeah. And if you're going to be an innovator, you got to take risks and you got to go for it. Got to jump off that cliff.
Yeah. You got to not worry about what other people think.
Oh, not at all.
Yeah. You got to but people do worry about other things people think, but at the same time, you can't let it stop you.
Yeah.
And you just have to move on.
A completely different direction with all the conferences that you host and also that you attend, networking, is it?
I hate the word networking.
What would you like to call it?
I think network, it's like gossip. All of a sudden gossip became a good word.
Yeah.
And networking to me is like the word gossip.
Yeah.
It's kind of just meeting people. The word networking, it's collaborating. I don't know. I just don't like that word.
There is a bit of a negative connotation to it, isn't there?
Like, I'm going to go network.
Yeah, right.
I think that is like the stupidest thing.
Well, but what would you recommend? Again, you're the king of the conferences.
I believe that you should be a collaboration artist. Talk to people. Be interested in other people. Don't limit yourself to go out there and hustle. The best selling is not selling.
Yes.
The best selling is getting to know people and understand their needs and seeing if you can solve their thing for the most part. That's why I like the idea of let's.
I like
getting to the let's.
It's interesting. There was some conference I went to in the wedding industry, and I was on a shuttle with Andre Mayer, who's a wonderful photographer in the industry, and we were talking about this. And he was saying talking about how he knows, especially younger people. And I used to do this when I was young. I would look at, who are the speakers? I didn't really know who the hitters were. And the speakers must be people. And let me read about them. And who do I want to meet? And who do I want to hit on? This is real when I was young. And we noticed at the conference, there are people that seem too aggressive and a little bit too fake about it. And he was saying how he loves to have absolutely no goal at all, just simply show up, have fun. And he said that when he shifted that in his brain, he started getting more business.
Oh, I totally agree with it. Like, be your real self.
And it's more comfortable that way in the end.
I used to be really nervous as a public speaker.
Yeah.
Until I decided I just have to be myself. And then it was like, it's fun.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, if you go to an event and you're yourself, you have to be observant and you have to be polite and you have to sort of be respectful of other people.
Business, perspective.
But if you're too aggressive, sometimes it's just
people sense it quick.
Oh yeah, you can't be being kind of authentic is really good and like being there for the right reasons.
Yeah.
If you go in there, you're always looking to get something. You're never going to get it.
See, and I tell younger people too, even when they do make what they consider connections, don't push it. See them again somewhere else. Just, eventually people will respect you.
I think the best way to not network, but to have an impact is to take a leadership role in something. Like after 9/11 in New York City, I decided, let me help the city. And I put together a group of 200 people in the event industry. And we did things like, we lit up the Empire State Building in yellow to get Snapple to do an event. We took over Gracie Mansion and we brought all of the pharmaceutical meeting planners and the different meeting planners to town.
Yeah.
And we did things that helped the city. And I believe that leadership and contributing your time pays back in spades. And every time I've done it, it's been the secret sauce. Getting involved in the community, getting to know people on a non-selling atmosphere helps all the time.
Yeah, contribute, give,
and you get to have deep relationships with people that want to give you their business.
Yes.
As opposed to, oh my God, I'm going to make it's going to be cheaper than the other guy.
That is a great point. Get involved. I want to talk about your podcast, Gather Geeks, hosted by yourself. And is it
Beth Cormack?
Yeah, the editor-in-chief of BizBash. Can you tell me basically what that's about?
Right. Well, we've done 150 episodes. I'd like to interview you on my podcast. That would be another thing.
That would be an honor.
What I love about podcasts is you get to sort of overhear unedited conversations. Like I have done, when I listen to podcasts, I listen to it and then the next day I go into my office and say, have we done this? And all of a sudden I get the eye rolling, oh no, he listened to another podcast.
Right.
But the stuff I'm learning is before it gets out into the public for the most part.
Yeah,
so you get the secret sauce of what someone else is talking about. And if you're going to hire a consultant, you'd have to pay them $1,000 a day
That's
to
right.
get the same information.
Yeah.
So why not just listen to a lot of podcasts? And so that's what I like about it. And we try to do all different types of the industry. I mean, I believe that the industry is all morphing together. So the whole idea of the human gathering business is one thing, and everybody can steal from different things. Like example, the wedding business.
Yep.
The wedding business is not about the bride and groom. It's about what's going on at the tables where people are having these conversations, and you're putting together these eclectic groups of people that have never met before.
That's right, yeah.
And you have weddings and marriages and business deals and everything else that come out of weddings that you never, ever expect.
That's right.
And so I think that the power of those family gatherings are a lot different than paying tribute to the bride and the groom.
Interesting way to look at that.
Yeah. And I think that's the privilege of having a wedding.
So where can people find the
Gather Geeks on iTunes and Spotify and on bizbash.com/Gather Geeks.
Well, I'll put it all in the show notes so people can get to it. So, David, I mean, you've done so much. You've seen it all. You've accomplished so much. What is next for you? What is left for you that you really want to grab onto?
I do believe that we are in the most important business in the world. I'm here in Washington right now. I grew up in Washington. When people talk to each other and connect, the problems kind of start going away. If you are a collaboration artist in the right way, then people connect. So I am basically on this mission to make people collaboration artists. And I'm actually working on trying to do this nonprofit called Collaborate America that recognizes collaboration artists, whether they're planners or whether they're orchestra conductors or whether they're leaders in a community. And so once we recognize them and make them as powerful as the chef business, chefs in the world used to be people in the kitchen.
That's right.
And no one took them seriously.
Right.
Now they're superstars because the analog, the metaphor for a chef is like the ultimate diplomat. But I think that the event organizers that can put together something like a climate conference or a huge thing for training and development are the superstars of the future. And so that's kind of where I want to go eventually.
Listen, I may have to call this particular podcast with you something about collaboration artists. I love that phrase. I think that's great.
Yep.
Well, wow, Dave. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I've really been looking forward to having you, and we covered a lot of material in a short period of time. I want to make sure you get home on time.
Absolutely.
But thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with David Adler. Please check out his site at bizbash.com. His social media handles are also BizBash. And be sure to check out the show notes and our website at theweddingbiz.com. And please share this episode with your friends and colleagues. I know it was such a wonderful interview with David. We'd love for everyone else to find out about it and to find out about our show, too. And don't forget to listen to the follow-on segment, The Next Level, in 2 days, in which a guest co-host and I tease out some of the highlights in order to help break them down and give you some real good tips and tactics to help raise your own business to the next level. And this week's guest co-host on The Next Level is going to be Sean Lowe, founder of The Business of Being Creative. He is a wonderful, wonderful consultant, been on the show many times because he has so much to offer, so be sure to check that out. Also want to let you know that next week's guest is going to be Ali Barone of Ali Barone Creations, a multi-dimensional consulting and design corporation specializing in creative interior and outdoor transformations and so much more. So be sure to check out next week. We're also going to, well, unless you already recognize the name, she was a big deal in television on a certain show a couple of years ago. So we will bring that up on the interview. Be sure to subscribe to The Wedding Biz and definitely follow us, especially on Instagram at The Wedding Biz. We want to thank Kushner Entertainment, our sponsor. Kushner Entertainment offers high-touch service with the highest level of music and entertainment available for events. Go to KushnerEntertainment.com, and we'll catch you next week on The Wedding Biz.